The pandemic has fast-forwarded the future of work, and it's here to stay. So what we have is a structural shift, and we're not seeing any signs of reversal of that happening anytime, soon. But also with this structural shift, let us see, flip the narrative of what we don't know and take what we know for facts and try to build on the facts and evidence that we already have from the International Labour Organization. So we provide estimates that around 1.6 billion workers globally are employed in jobs that are already significantly affected by digital technologies, including automation, AI-enabled systems, digital management tools, and what have you. So this represents half of the global employment. We also know that 25% of workers globally, that's around another 1 billion workers, are employed in occupations with high potential for remote work. So this is the evidence we have. So here, as the ILO, that is one of the international institutions but works typically with government employers and workers, what is the uptake from the evidence so that we provide the regulations that are necessary where work takes place in one location, income or value added is generated somewhere else, and the jurisdiction is somewhere in between. And we are having national systems that might need to catch up with this evolution so that we have those trans-border regulations in terms of social protection, in terms of many aspects of decent work as such.
I agree that, maybe not to the same extent we had in the year 2020, but it does feel like things have shifted on a more permanent basis. And we've seen the rise of this sort of digital nomadism, I guess is the term for it. And you see it reflected in government policies. I'm thinking of like Portugal with their sort of tax programs. Italy, I'm personally looking into a part-time residency in Italy, and they have programs for people who work there. And by the way, yes, the other day I was in the Mall of the Emirates looking at business development at a property here in Dubai. Why not, right? Because the weather is always like this. I guess, Rada, from the World Bank's perspective, this sort of borderless work or digital nomadism, from what you observe, how are countries, companies, and individuals benefiting from these arrangements, and where do you see gaps that require, policy intervention, either by governments or employers?
Thank you, and thank you for having me. It's also my first time in the World Government Summit, and thanks to the Ministry of Human Resources for the invite. So let me start by saying this concept is not new. It has existed, but historically speaking, it was observed in literature from the service trading angle. And more recently, practitioners, governments, they're looking at it from the global labor market angle, which is a bit different. So we're looking at the supply and the demand globally, looking at the matching across borders, hence the borderless term. And it's beneficial for all the parties that you have mentioned. So think of the worker that is probably highly skilled or medium skilled, but living in a country, in a labor market that does not produce jobs yet at that skill level. What do? Do they downgrade, take a lower skilled job? They have the option to move.
I'm going to guess never, right? They never do that.
They do, unfortunately. Many young people end up taking these jobs, and we lose that human capital. In many cases, they migrate, which is good. We need labor mobility. However, not everyone can migrate. 16% globally, there was this survey in 2023, where they asked 140,000 adults in 140 countries, ideally, and if you had the choice, would you leave your country of origin and move elsewhere? 16% said yes. And out of the 16%, 5% had plans towards that move. So bottom line, what I'm saying is not everyone has the option to go elsewhere to get the job that is at their skill level. And this is why we need this flexibility. We need this flexibility for the most vulnerable the women that have care responsibilities, for example, 42% of gig workers are women, against 39.7% of female labor force participation. So you see the difference.
Mm-hmm.
On the employer's side, you have the cost efficiency component. So there is the wage arbitrage. You have, let's say in the US, for a certain job, the person is paid an hourly wage of, let's say, $12, and in another country, they're getting, in the Philippines, for example, $6. And if you adjust that for productivity, so they're as productive, then there is that difference of cost efficiency. And many people at that stage make the assumption that this worker abroad is less skilled than the one that is in the country. But it's not true. Evidence tells us, when looking at job postings online, that there is very little, in 80% of the cases, there is very little difference in the skill level. So a math teacher, for example, they need to know what? They need to know math. They need to do how to deliver the class, how to interact and have some study skills. And then you add to that the use of online platforms, for example. So there is little variation, which leads us to the point for the employer. It's cost efficient, and you're getting an almost equally skilled employee. For countries, I mean, it doesn't even require explanation. You bridge the gaps, and you get higher employment rates and higher productivity.
Well, what I like about this notion of higher productivity is it's essential for growth. Tan, Singapore is renowned for a couple things, many things actually. The cocktails at Raffles, but no, I wasn't referring that. Productivity. Singapore leads in productivity. Singapore leads in terms of innovation of partnerships between private capital and government. How is and as I understand it, your role is very much around reskilling of your labor force. How have you gone about doing that, and what indicia of success do you use? What is your sort of metric to determine that whether it's working or not?
Thank you very much. First of all, I'm very honored to be here today, and if I can just be allowed to, as a practitioner, may I congratulate the Undersecretary for the impressive work of UAE Skills. Yeah. So to your question, we've taken a very serious approach to reskilling and lifelong learning. And it's precisely what you said in the second panel. I don't know. So we don't know exactly what undergraduate education, what pre-employment training can bring someone throughout the entire length and the entire career lifespan. So it is very important as technologies change, jobs, nature change, to also be able to also then for governments to invest similarly in both the pre-employment training and post-employment training. We use skills forecasting, labor market surveillance, a little similar to what UAE is doing. Differences are where we can learn from each other. And one of the important points that we have established is that it is important to have government support for adult training. The employer must pay a little, the individual must pay a little, but because there's fundamental market failure and a sort of fundamental unwillingness, to sort of invest in the future. I mean, that's a nature of human beings, right? And so because of that market failure, it's important to have that level of government support. The second point is, once you have that level of government support, you must have discerning users. The individuals must have a view of their career needs and be the enlightened user of subsidized retraining. And the final point is that employers must be involved in this. Employers must continue to invest in their own workers. Yep.
So it sounds like again we're hearing consistent themes, right? This notion of transferable skill sets, of agility, of partnership. Nick, you are Vice Chairman of ServiceNow. Near as I can tell, I just did a check, 30,000 employees roughly, globally. How do you as a company take your, first of all, I guess, if you would opine on the sort of policy pronouncements you've heard from government and other non-private organizations, and then give us your sense of how you all approach this sort of remote work construct, because I got to assume a decent chunk of your 30,000 are not all in Santa Clara.
Well, Terrence, first let me add my appreciation to our hosts here in the UAE. I think not only for hosting a spectacularly engaging event, but in terms of government innovation and the innovation of the profession of public administration, I don't think there's a better place anywhere in the world, so compliments to the UAE. I think people do their best work when they're happy. It's not a scientific formula, and people's happiness tends to go up when they're allowed to self-determine where they're best able to raise a family and to have a high quality of life. So for us, we stopped having that argument years ago of trying to prescribe a fixed arrangement for where we believe that an individual can give us their best work. People want to feel empowered, they want to feel trusted, and ultimately they want to feel that they're free to make the contribution to the organization they work for in a manner that builds on who they are, the skills they have, and that doesn't destroy their ability to balance other aspects of their life. So, happiness happens to be a big focus here in the UAE as well. Yep. And anything they do in the UAE, I tend to think makes a lot of sense for applicability across sectors.
I'm going to ask this question of, we'll sort of do a little bit of a speed round here. I want to ask about, we'll go down the line. Are we witnessing a fundamental shift in the traditional relationship between workers and employers? It kind of feels a little different now than it did before. Maybe it's the same, just in a different context. How can things like dignity of work be preserved while having flexible, location-independent work models? What do you think?
I think it's not just the relationship, but we're seeing global patterns and trends that include pairings between regions. So we're talking about employers in the global north pairing with employees and workers in the global south. So it's even bigger than just this bilateral change in relationship. And it's something that governments and practitioners need to pay more attention to, starting by putting the clear definition of what this is. What is borderless work? What falls under it? And I'll leave the protection element to ILO to talk about.
It's that perspective from the World Bank to think about it in that context of the global north and the global south. It makes all the sense in the world, but it was well enunciated. What about protections?
Sure. I mean, the notion of market failure was brought forward already on the panel, and with that comes income insecurity, and definitely social protection has an important role to come here. And definitely governments are the duty bearers when it comes to protection, but it's not only the responsibility of governments to do the policies, but also for employers to have their fair share there, and as well as the workers' voice should be heard. And this is the difficult moment right now in terms of bringing the voice of workers under algorithms and new platforms and what have you, with all that is happening. So this is something that we need to make sure that we are not fostering, borderless work with exclusion, but we want to make sure that we have more of an inclusive environment and making sure that everybody is heard. And the role of international cooperation is essential because of the issue of the global north and the global south. So how could we have and foster better international cooperation around that is important. Just to mention, with what we know is that of the working age population, around 80% are going without social protection, more so those that are working in the digital platforms and what have you. So we need to be taking the numbers we have, what we know, into account once more.
Let me ask, in the United States, there is a big discussion, a big controversial discussion about UBI, Universal Basic Income. And it's been the pronouncements of some tech leaders that, yes, this new world is going to eviscerate a lot of labor, but that's okay. We'll just have this UBI that'll be like a minimum wage for the people who didn't make the leap. is that even doable on an international level? I know that's not in our...
That's a whole discussion more
I
than
know,
the-
right?
That's
That's the
another
next
panel.
panel that will just continue. No, I'm just kidding. But like, it just feels to me like a strange abstract, this notion.
Well, it's not that strange as such. I mean, there are some manifestations
Okay.
of some Nordic countries, already applying those concepts. So there's always room for improvement, but it takes a village, as they say, to educate. So it takes a lot of education to make
Right.
things happen in the right way for everybody. But again, what the DG mentioned on a human-centered approach, the human should be
Right.
the center of all our policy making as such.
Tan, how does Singapore think of that sort of construct between worker and
I think
employer?
it's very important for us to make sure that employers remain vested in investing in the human capital of their workers.
Yeah.
Yeah, because with all this idea of the mobile workforce, borderlessness, there's the idea that, it's an externality if I train the fella, and then he leaves me and joins a rival company and so on. So it's important to continue to have enlightened employers who will continue to invest in their human capital. There are some policy mechanics. I know the UK, certain European countries, Singapore, so we have a skills levy where we do that. But that's just one level. The more important part is for employers, whether as a group in aggregate or singly, to want to continue to invest in their workers, even if their workers leave them in 5-10 years' time.
Nick, I gotta imagine ServiceNow invests millions, if not billions of dollars in training your workforce. Again, this construct of employer, employee, you think it's manifestly changed, and how do you view that?
Well, yes, we do invest, but no, it hasn't changed, and I'll tell you
Okay.
why. There were always bad organizations in the past, and I promise there will be bad organizations in the future.
That's true.
I think if you listen to the people who work in your organization, and in particular in government, where there is such a tight relationship between what's the purpose of the organization, who are we trying to serve, and how we are trying to improve their outcomes, if you listen to the people who are on the front line doing that work, you'll understand what training is required. You'll understand where there are organizational changes that are required. You'll understand where there are technological changes that are required. If you don't listen, you won't be any good.
So I think we're out of time. I think the conclusion now, after 3 of these panels, is twofold. One, I don't know, but I want to be happy. Thank you very much.